Sethris had lived for 12,000 years, and in all that time, she had never found a question without an answer. The Velethan archives contained everything. Every species that had ever risen in the galaxy. Every war that had been fought. Every star that had been born and died. The archives remembered all of it. But today, Sethris had found something strange. She floated in the center of the archive sphere, surrounded by glowing data streams that moved like rivers of light. Her four arms worked quickly, pulling information from threads that were older than most civilizations. She was looking for something specific, a gap, an absence. She had noticed it 3 days ago while teaching young archivists about galactic survey protocols. Every life-bearing world in the galaxy had a file. Every single one. Billions of planets. Documented across 4 billion years of Velethan observation. Every planet except one. Sol 3. The humans called it Earth. Sethris pulled up the entry and stared at it again. The file was almost empty. Just a single line of text in the oldest Velethan language, so ancient that most of her people had forgotten how to read it. Quarantine. Absolute. Do not wake the children. That was all. No survey data, no biological samples, no cultural observations, nothing. The humans had been part of galactic civilization for 200 years now. They attended conferences. They traded technology. They argued and laughed and made a mess wherever they went. Sethris had met several of them and found them strangely fascinating. They were loud and emotional and surprisingly creative for such a young species, but the Velethan had never spoken to them. Not once. Sethris had always assumed this was simple arrogance. Her people were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had seeded life on countless worlds. They considered themselves above the concerns of younger races. But now she wondered if something else was happening, something her people were hiding. She requested access to the deeper archives. The response came immediately. A red symbol appeared in front of her face, pulsing with warning. Access denied. Authorization level insufficient. Sethris felt her skin ripple with surprise. She was a senior archivist. There was almost nothing in the archives she could not access. She tried again, using her emergency credentials. Access denied. This file is restricted by order of the Eternal Chorus. The Eternal Chorus, the ruling council of the Velethan. Being so old that they had watched the first stars ignite, they rarely involved themselves in anything. They spent most of their time in deep meditation, contemplating questions that younger minds could not even understand. Why would they care about one small planet orbiting an ordinary star? Sethris should have stopped there. She knew that. The chorus had their reasons for everything, and those reasons were beyond her understanding. She was supposed to trust them. All Velethan were supposed to trust them. But Sethris had spent 12,000 years looking for answers. She did not know how to stop. She began searching in other ways. Side references, mentions in unrelated files, fragments of old communications that had been archived but not classified. It took her 6 days to find something useful. A personal journal from a Velethan scientist named Korath, written 9,000 years ago. Most of it was routine research notes, but one entry stood out. I have committed a grave sin. I traveled to Sol 3. I walked among the humans. I needed to understand why we fear them so much. Now I know. The chorus was right to quarantine that world. The humans must never learn what they are. If they understood their purpose, everything would end. Everything. The entry stopped there. Sethris searched for more writings from Korath but found nothing. It was as if he had ceased to exist immediately after writing those words. She knew she should report her findings to the chorus. That was protocol. But something in those words had awakened a fear deep inside her, a fear she did not understand. She kept searching. 3 more days passed. Sethris barely slept. She moved through the archives like a ghost, pulling threads that had not been touched in millions of years. Slowly, she began to assemble a picture. The Velethan had not always been wise. 4 billion years ago, when they were young and arrogant, they had experimented with forces beyond their understanding. They had reached into the spaces between dimensions, looking for power, and they had found something. The old records called it the Hollow. Sethris read the descriptions with growing horror. The Hollow was not a creature in any normal sense. It was more like a living concept, a sentient equation, a hunger given form. It existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else, somewhere that human scientists would later call dark matter. The hollow fed on consciousness, not bodies, not energy, minds. It consumed thoughts and memories and identities, leaving only empty shells behind. When the young Velethan found it, they thought they could control it. They thought they could use it as a weapon against rival species. They were wrong. The hollow nearly destroyed them. In less than a century, it consumed 90% of the Velethan population. Trillions of minds devoured, gone forever. The survivors managed to trap it, but they could not destroy it. The hollow was not truly alive, so it could not truly die. They could only contain it, seal it away in a prison that would last until the end of time. They chose a young planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, a world of fire and chaos, constantly reshaping itself through volcanic activity. They buried the hollow deep in the planet's core, wrapped in layers of technology that would keep it sleeping. But a prison needs a warden. The Velethan knew that eventually the hollow would begin to wake. It would push against its bonds. It would try to escape. They needed something to keep it contained, something that could maintain the prison without technology, because technology could fail. So they created a species. They seeded the young planet with life, guiding evolution carefully over billions of years. They created a species whose minds generated a specific type of consciousness, a frequency of thought that the hollow could not penetrate. They created humans. Sethris stopped reading. Her body had gone cold. Her four hearts were beating too fast. The humans were not an accident. They were not a natural development. They were a designed species, created for a single purpose, to keep the most dangerous thing in the universe locked away. And they had no idea. Before Sethris could process what she had learned, the archive sphere went dark. The data streams vanished. She floated alone in absolute blackness. A voice spoke. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the oldest voice Sethris had ever heard, heavy with the weight of billions of years. "You have seen what you should not see, young one." Light returned, but it was different now. Sethris was no longer in the archive sphere. She was somewhere else entirely, a vast chamber made of crystal that pulsed with inner light. At the center of the chamber stood a figure that was barely recognizable as Velethan, the first voice, the oldest living member of her species. A being so ancient that its body had transformed into something between flesh and thought. "I did not mean to," Sethris began. "You meant exactly what you did," the first voice interrupted. "You asked questions. You sought truth. This is your nature. I do not blame you for it." The ancient being moved closer. Its form shifted constantly, never quite solid. "I will show you what you wish to know, and then you will understand why we keep our silence." A memory poured into Sethris's mind. She saw the ancient Velethan, young and proud and foolish. She saw them tear a hole in reality itself. She saw the hollow emerge, a darkness that was not an absence of light, but an absence of everything. She felt what it was like when it fed, the screaming of minds being erased, the horror of consciousness being unwound thread by thread. She saw the desperate battle to contain it, the sacrifices, the failures, the final terrible solution, and she saw the creation of humanity, generation after generation, carefully guided. Minds that dreamed strange dreams and thought impossible thoughts. Minds that burned so brightly that the hollow could not touch them. The vision ended. Sethris found herself on her knees weeping. "Now you understand," the first voice said. "The humans are the lock. Every human mind is a piece of the prison. 7 billion locks, all working together without knowing it. They contain the hollow simply by existing, simply by thinking and dreaming and feeling." "Why can they never know?" Sethris whispered. The first voice was silent for a long moment. "Because the lock must not know it is a lock. A mind that understands its own mechanism can change that mechanism. If the humans learned what they were, they might reject their purpose. They might try to free themselves. And if they stop being what we made them to be, even for a moment." The ancient being did not finish the sentence. It did not need to. The hollow would wake, Sethris said. It would feed again. It would consume everything, the first voice confirmed. Every mind in the galaxy, every thought that has ever existed. We built the prison to last until the end of the universe. But the prison depends on the wardens never knowing they are wardens. Sethris looked up at the ancient being. A new question had formed in her mind. What happens if someone tells them? The first voice turned away. For the first time, Sethris saw something like fear in its shifting form. Then we do what we must to protect the galaxy, even if it means destroying the wardens ourselves. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, 7 billion humans went about their lives. They worked and loved and fought and dreamed. They had no idea that their very existence was the only thing standing between the universe and oblivion. And far above them, hidden in the cold spaces between stars, the oldest species in the galaxy watched and waited and feared. Because the Velethan knew something that the humans did not. The hollow was beginning to stir, and soon, very soon, someone would have to make a terrible choice. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin had spent 15 years chasing ghosts. She stood at the observation window of Nexus Station, watching ships from 100 different species move through the docking lanes. Tall Karathi vessels with their elegant curves, boxy Mordran freighters covered in sensor arrays, small, quick-fallen ships that darted between the larger craft like fish. But no Velethan ships. There were never any Velethan ships near anything human. Wei-Lin had first noticed the pattern when she was a junior diplomat, fresh from the academy on Earth. She had been assigned to a trade negotiation between the Mordran and the Fallen. The Velethan had a representative there, an ancient being named Thesara, who was supposed to mediate the discussion. When Wei-Lin walked into the room, Thesara had frozen. The alien's 4 eyes had locked onto Wei-Lin with an expression she had never seen before. Something between terror and grief. Then Thesara had left, without a word. The Velethan delegation had withdrawn from the negotiation entirely, and no one had ever explained why. Wei-Lin had tried to investigate, but she was young and powerless. Her superiors told her not to worry about it. The Velethan were strange and unknowable. They did not explain themselves to younger species. But Wei-Lin could not let it go. She had spent the next 15 years watching, collecting data, looking for patterns. The patterns were undeniable. Velethan ships changed course to avoid Sol system by at least 10 light years. Velethan representatives left conferences when human delegations arrived. Velethan historians refused to discuss Earth's past. Velethan scientists would not analyze human biology. Every other elder species in the galaxy treated humans with condescension. They saw humanity as children, young and foolish and unimportant. The Velethan treated humans like a plague, something to be avoided at all costs. Wei-Lin had risen through the diplomatic ranks, driven by her obsession. Now she was the senior Earth ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. She had access to resources and information that junior diplomats could only dream of. And she had a plan. Nexus Station was hosting a memorial for the Karathi species, who had lost their homeworld to a stellar collapse 3,000 years ago. Every major species would be represented, including the Velethan. Wei-Lin had studied the guest list carefully. Most Velethan diplomats had learned to avoid her, but there was one name she did not recognize: Korath. A junior representative who had never attended a human-involved event before. He would not know to run. The memorial ceremony was held in the station's largest hall, a vast space with transparent walls that looked out on the stars. Representatives from hundreds of species mingled and talked, sharing memories of the lost Karathi world. Wei-Lin moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She shook hands and exchanged pleasantries. She laughed at jokes that were not funny and pretended to care about trade agreements that did not matter. All the while she watched for Korath. She found him near the observation window, standing alone. He was old even by Velethan standards, his gray skin marked with the swirling patterns that indicated great age. His 4 eyes were fixed on the stars, lost in thought. Wei-Lin approached slowly. She did not want to spook him. "Beautiful view," she said, stopping beside him. "I always wonder what the Karathi saw when they looked at these stars. What stories they told." Korath turned to look at her. His expression was polite but distant. They saw the same stars we all see, he said. They simply told different stories about them. I suppose that's true of all species, Waylon said. We all look at the same universe, but we see different things. Korath nodded slowly. You are Ambassador Chen, the human who asked too many questions. Waylon felt a flash of surprise, but kept her face neutral. My reputation precedes me. Your reputation is a source of great concern to my people, Korath said. You have spent many years trying to understand why we avoid your kind. I will tell you now that you will never succeed. Some questions have no answers that younger minds can accept. Try me. Korath's four eyes narrowed. You are persistent. This is a human trait that we find troubling. We find your evasion troubling, Waylon replied. Every other species in the galaxy has diplomatic relations with Earth, trade agreements, cultural exchanges. Even the species who do not like us still talk to us. But the Velethan act as if we carry some kind of disease. Why? Korath was silent for a long moment. His swirling patterns seemed to pulse faintly. Some diseases are not physical, he said finally. Some infections spread through knowledge, through understanding. There are things that your species must not learn, Ambassador, for your sake and for ours. What things? I have already said too much. Waylon made a decision. She reached out and placed her hand on Korath's arm. The effect was immediate. Korath's entire body went rigid. His four eyes widened with something that looked like pure terror. A sound escaped him, a low keening noise that Waylon had never heard a Velethan make. But that was not what caught her attention. When her skin touched his, something happened. A flash of images flooded her mind. Darkness. Endless, hungry darkness. Something vast and patient, waiting in the deep places of the universe. And beneath it all, a sound like a heartbeat, steady and slow. The images lasted less than a second. Then they were gone, and Korath was pulling away from her, stumbling backward. Do not touch me, he gasped. Do not ever touch me. Other guests were turning to look at them. Conversation stopped. The room grew quiet. Korath's eyes were wild. You felt it, didn't you? You felt it wake up. Felt what? Waylon asked. Her heart was pounding. Her hand tingled where she had touched him. The thing you carry inside you. The thing all your kind carry. Korath's voice was rising. You have no idea what you are. What you are holding back. We built you to contain it. And if you ever learn the truth... He stopped himself. His patterns were pulsing violently now, rippling across his skin like waves. I must go, he said. Forget this conversation. Forget everything I have said. For your own safety. He turned and fled. Within minutes, every Velethan on the station had departed. Their ships left so quickly that they nearly caused collisions in the docking lanes. Waylon stood alone by the observation window, staring at the stars. She had felt something when she touched Korath, something real, a presence deep inside her mind that she had never noticed before. It was like discovering a door in a room she had lived in her entire life, a door she had somehow never seen. And behind that door, something was waiting. Over the following weeks, Waylon threw herself into research. She pulled every file she could find on human anomalies, the strange gaps in human evolution that scientists could not explain, the unique structure of human consciousness that no other species shared, the endless failed attempts to digitize human minds or create artificial human intelligence. She found a pattern that no one else had noticed. Humans were different, not just culturally or psychologically, but fundamentally different at a level that even human scientists did not understand. Human brains generated neural patterns that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Human consciousness had properties that violated known physics, and humans were the only species in the galaxy that dreamed. Other species slept, but they did not dream. Their minds went quiet during rest. But human minds never stopped. Even in sleep, they created stories and images and impossible scenarios. They built entire worlds inside their heads, night after night, for no apparent reason. Scientists had always assumed this was a quirk of human evolution, a side effect of having such large brains. No one had ever suggested that it might be intentional. But Wei Lin was beginning to suspect that nothing about humanity was accidental. She found an old research file buried in a restricted database. A study conducted 50 years ago by a joint human-Velethan research team, the only time the Velethan had ever agreed to study humans directly. The study had been classified and the team disbanded. The lead researcher, a human named Dr. Sarah Monroe, had died in an accident shortly after the project ended. Wayland read the final report with growing unease. Human consciousness operates on a frequency that we cannot measure or replicate. This frequency appears to interact with extra-dimensional spaces in ways we do not understand. Our Velethan colleagues have refused to explain the significance of this finding. However, based on their reactions, I believe human minds may serve some purpose that we have not been told about, a purpose the Velethan consider too dangerous to reveal. The report ended with a handwritten note from Dr. Monroe. They are afraid of us, not because of what we might do, but because of what we are. I believe humanity was designed, created for a specific purpose, and I believe we are still serving that purpose, even though we do not know what it is. Waylin sat back in her chair. Her hands were trembling. The presence she had felt when she touched Korath was still there, lurking at the edge of her awareness. It was patient and old and utterly calm. It did not feel evil. It did not feel hostile. It felt like it was waiting for something. Waylin made a decision. She would find out what humanity really was, no matter the cost. She would discover the truth that the Velethan had hidden for so long. She began planning an expedition. There had to be evidence somewhere. Records or artifacts or something that would explain why the galaxy's oldest species feared a bunch of hairless apes on a small blue planet. She would start with Earth itself, with the places that humans had always considered strange. The deep oceans, the hidden caves, the ancient sites where something had always felt wrong. She did not know that she was being watched. Far away in the crystal chambers of the Velethan homeworld, the first voice felt the disturbance in the pattern. A human was asking the right questions, getting too close to the truth. "It has begun," the ancient being whispered. "The children are waking up. And deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a prison built 4 billion years ago, something that had slept since before humans existed began to dream. It dreamed of freedom. It dreamed of hunger. And for the first time in millions of years, it dreamed of hope. Sethris had committed the ultimate crime. She had traveled to Earth. The journey had taken 3 months. She could not use normal routes because every Velethan ship was monitored. Instead, she had bought passage on a fallen trader and hidden herself among cargo containers filled with exotic minerals. Now she walked through a human city called Tokyo, wearing a biological disguise that made her look like one of them. 2 arms instead of 4, smooth skin instead of patterns, small eyes that saw only visible light. It was the most overwhelming experience of her long life. Humans were everywhere, millions of them packed into towers of glass and steel. They moved in rivers of bodies, flowing through streets and underground tunnels. They talked constantly, their voices layering over each other until the whole city hummed with sound. And their minds. Sethris could feel them even through her disguise. Human consciousness burned like fire. Each mind was a small sun, radiating thoughts and emotions and dreams with incredible intensity. She understood now why the Hollow could not penetrate this species. Their minds were too loud, too bright, too chaotic. The Hollow fed on silence and emptiness, but humans had no silence inside them. Even when they slept, their minds kept creating, kept imagining, kept burning with inner light. But Sethris also noticed something troubling. Many of the humans she passed were staring at small glowing screens. They walked with their eyes down, their attention focused on devices instead of the world around them. Their minds, which should have been blazing with activity, were strangely quiet, passive, receiving instead of creating. She watched a young human sitting on a bench, scrolling through images on his screen. His consciousness was barely flickering. His thoughts were shallow repetitions of what he was seeing, not original creations of his own. Sethris felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The humans were changing. Their minds were growing quieter, less creative, less chaotic. If this continued, would they still be able to contain the Hollow? She spent 3 weeks on Earth, moving from city to city. She visited the places where humans gathered in large numbers. She observed their rituals and customs and daily routines. She found beauty everywhere. Humans creating art for no practical reason. Humans caring for strangers they would never see again. Humans falling in love despite knowing they would one day lose each other. Humans facing death with courage she had not expected from such short-lived creatures. She also found darkness. Humans hurting each other for reasons she could not understand. Humans destroying their own planet. Humans choosing cruelty when kindness would have cost them nothing. They were a contradiction, a species that held impossible extremes within a single mind. And somehow that contradiction was exactly what made them capable of containing the hollow. The hollow was pure hunger, simple and absolute. Human minds were never simple, never absolute. They held light and darkness together, and in that balance, they found a strength that pure beings could never match. On her last day in Tokyo, Sethris received a message. It came through channels that should have been impossible to access, coded in frequencies that no species but the Velethan could decode. It contained only a set of coordinates and a time. Someone wanted to meet her. Sethris almost ignored it. It was probably a trap. The chorus might have discovered her location. They might be waiting to arrest her for breaking quarantine. But the coordinates were not in Japan. They were in the Pacific Ocean, at a point where the water was deeper than most mountains were tall. Sethris had spent decades studying the archives. She knew there were places on Earth where strange things happened. Places where ships vanished and instruments failed. Places the Velethan had noted in their ancient records but never explained. The coordinates pointed to one of those places. She could not resist. Sethris hired a small submarine from a company that asked no questions. She piloted it alone into the deep Pacific, following the coordinates to a point where the ocean floor should have been empty. It was not empty. Her instruments detected a structure far below. Something massive, buried under millions of years of sediment. Something that was definitely not natural. She dove deeper. The pressure outside the submarine became crushing. The darkness became absolute. And then her lights caught something that made her heart stop. A doorway. It was Velethan architecture, unmistakable even after 4 billion years. Graceful curves and mathematical precision, built to last until the end of time. The doorway was enormous, large enough to fly a ship through, and it was open. Sethris guided her submarine through the doorway and into a space that should not have existed at the bottom of an ocean. A vast chamber filled with air and light, kept alive by technology so advanced that it seemed like magic. She docked her submarine and stepped out onto a platform of crystalline material. The chamber stretched away in all directions, disappearing into a darkness that felt alive. At the center of the chamber, she found her. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin was standing at the edge of a pit, a hole in the floor that seemed to have no bottom. Darkness flowed up from it like smoke, swirling and churning, but never quite touching the light. "You're Velethan," Chen said without turning around. "I can feel it. The hollow showed me how to sense your kind." Sethris approached slowly. "You found this place. It called me here. It's been calling humans here for thousands of years. We just never listened before." Chen finally turned. Her eyes were strange, deeper than they should have been. "You're the one who's been watching Earth, aren't you? The curious one. I felt you arrived 3 weeks ago. How did you—" "I told you. The hollow showed me." Chen looked back at the pit. "It's not what I expected. Your people told you it was a monster, didn't they? A mindless hunger that would consume everything." "It is a monster," Sethris said. "It destroyed 90% of my species. It consumed trillions of minds. 4 billion years ago, before it had time to think about what it was doing." Chen knelt at the edge of the pit. "Come closer. Let it show you what it showed me." Every instinct in Sethris's body screamed at her to run. But she had come too far to stop now. She had broken every law of her people to find the truth. She walked to the edge and looked down. The darkness moved. It rose up to meet her, and suddenly she was falling into something that was not empty at all. It was full of thought, full of memory, full of a loneliness so vast it made her own long life seem like nothing. The hollow spoke to her, not in words but in concepts that appeared directly in her mind. It showed her its birth, how it had existed before this universe, a fragment of something from a previous reality, how it had survived the Big Bang and found itself alone in a cosmos that made no sense to it, how hunger was all it had known because hunger was all it had ever been. It showed her the Velethan, young and proud and foolish, ripping holes in reality, looking for power, finding it, being consumed by it. It showed her the prison, the long sleep, the endless darkness, and then it showed her the humans. At first they were just noise, irritating flickers of consciousness on the surface of its prison, but over hundreds of thousands of years, the Hollow had started to listen, to observe, to understand. Humans were not like other species. They did not simply think, they created. They imagined things that did not exist and then made them real. They told stories about impossible worlds. They dreamed dreams that had no purpose except beauty. The Hollow had never encountered anything like them. For billions of years, it had known only hunger. Take, consume, absorb. That was its entire existence. But humans showed it something else. They showed it giving, creating, making something from nothing, not to consume it, but simply because creation was good. The Hollow had been watching humans for 200,000 years, and in that time, something had changed. It no longer wanted to consume them. It wanted to understand them. Sethris emerged from the vision gasping. She was on her hands and knees at the edge of the pit, tears streaming down her face. "You see?" Chen said softly. "They made us to be jailers, but they didn't understand what they had created. Human consciousness doesn't just contain the Hollow. It teaches it. Teaches it what? To be something other than hunger." Chen stood up. The Velethan thought they were building a prison, but prisons don't change their prisoners. We do. Every story we tell, every dream we dream, every act of creation and kindness and love, the Hollow feels all of it. It's been learning from us since before we invented language. Sethris struggled to her feet. Her mind was reeling. "The Velethan don't know this," she said. "They think the Hollow is still the monster it was 4 billion years ago. They never bothered to check." Chen's voice held a trace of bitterness. "They were too afraid. They built their prison and created their wardens and then ran away. They never considered that things might change." "Why are you telling me this? Why did you bring me here?" Chen looked at her with those strange, deep eyes. "Because the Velethan are coming. They know I'm getting close to the truth. They've assembled a fleet at the edge of Sol System. If they decide that humans have become a threat to their prison, they'll destroy us." The words hit Sethris like a physical blow. "Destroy you? Every human on Earth, every human in the galaxy. They'll sterilize the planet and eliminate the entire species. It's been their backup plan from the beginning." Chen smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Billions of people who never asked to be jailers, erased because your species was too scared to look at what it had done." Sethris thought of the humans she had watched over the past 3 weeks. The artists and the lovers and the dreamers, the children playing in the streets, the old people sitting in parks, remembering lives full of joy and sorrow. "They cannot do this," she said. "They will if they think they have to, unless someone stops them." Chen held out her hand. "Help me. Help me show both species the truth before it's too late." Sethris looked at the human's hand. She thought of her people, her laws, her duty. Then she thought of the Hollow, reaching out across 4 billion years, learning to be something more than hunger. She took Chen's hand. "What do we do?" Chen smiled, a real smile this time. "We wake up the children and we show them what they really are." Deep in the pit, the darkness stirred. The Hollow felt the two minds joined in common purpose. It felt the hope that it had learned from humans, the impossible hope that things could change. For the first time in its eternal existence, it felt something like excitement. The game was finally beginning. The eternal chorus had not gathered in physical space for 10 million years. There had been no need. They communicated through thought alone. Their ancient minds connected across distances that would take light centuries to cross. But today, for the first time in ages beyond counting, they assembled. The chamber was older than most star systems. It existed at the heart of the Velethan homeworld, a crystalline space that pulsed with the combined consciousness of the oldest beings in the galaxy. 17 minds, each one billions of years old, each one carrying memories of eras when humans had not yet learned to walk upright. The first voice spoke. The quarantine has been breached. A human has found the deep structure. She has communicated with the hollow. Silence, not physical silence, but the silence of 17 minds processing information they had hoped never to receive. How is this possible? Asked the second voice. A being that had watched the first complex life crawl from Earth's oceans. The humans were designed to be unaware. Their minds should reject knowledge of their purpose. They have evolved beyond our designs, the first voice replied. We created them to contain the hollow, but we could not control what they became. Their consciousness has grown in ways we did not anticipate. Then we must implement the final protocol. This came from the seventh voice, always the most aggressive of the chorus. Sterilize the planet, eliminate the species, build new wardens from the genetic templates we preserved. That would take 100,000 years, another voice objected. The hollow would wake before the new wardens were ready. Then we contain it ourselves, as we did before. We barely survived before. We have grown old, weak. We cannot face the hollow again. The debate continued. Arguments flowed back and forth, layered with memories and calculations that younger minds could not have followed. But beneath all the words, one truth was clear. The Velethan were afraid. For 4 billion years, they had avoided this moment. They had built their prison and created their wardens, and then hidden from the consequences of their ancient mistake. Now the bill was coming due, and they had no idea how to pay it. The first voice raised a thought that silenced the others. There is another option, one we have never considered. Speak. We could tell them the truth, all of it. Let the humans know what they are, and trust them to make the right choice. The reaction was immediate. Horror, disbelief, fear. They would destroy themselves, the seventh voice said. No species could accept such a burden. Knowing that your entire existence is a cage, that your very consciousness is a chain, it would break them. Perhaps, the first voice agreed, or perhaps they would surprise us. They have surprised us before. We cannot take that risk. Then we take the other risk instead. We destroy them and hope we can survive what comes next. The chorus fell silent again. The two options hung in the shared mental space, each one terrible in its own way. Before they could reach a decision, something happened that none of them expected. Ambassador Chen Weilin began broadcasting. She stood in a studio on Earth, surrounded by cameras that would carry her message to every human settlement in the galaxy. Beside her stood Sethris, wearing her true form for the first time since arriving on Earth. 4 arms, gray skin, the swirling patterns of her people. The broadcast had been hacked into every frequency, every screen, every communication device. There was no way to stop it. People of Earth, Chen said. People of the colonies. My name is Ambassador Chen Weilin, and I am about to tell you the most important truth in human history. On the Velethan homeworld, the chorus watched in frozen horror. We were not accidents, Chen continued. We were not natural developments. We were created by the species standing beside me, the Velethan. 4 billion years ago, they made a terrible mistake. They found something in the space between dimensions, and they tried to use it, something called the Hollow. She explained it all. The Hollow's nature, the war that nearly destroyed the Velethan, the prison built at Earth's core, the creation of humanity as wardens who would never know their purpose. Our minds contain the Hollow, Chen said. Every thought we think, every dream we dream, creates a barrier that keeps it locked away. For 200,000 years, we have been doing this without knowing. We have been saving the galaxy simply by being human. She paused. The camera focused on her face. The Velethan are afraid of us now. They think that if we learn the truth, we will break. They have a fleet at the edge of our system, ready to destroy us all, to wipe out every human being in existence rather than risk the Hollow escaping. On ships throughout the galaxy, humans watched. On Earth and Luna and Mars, on the colonies of Alpha Centauri and Tau Ceti, on stations and outposts in distant worlds, Billions of minds turned their attention to the broadcast. But here is what the Velathan do not understand about us, Chen said. We have always known we were carrying something inside us. We felt it in our darkest moments, when despair tried to swallow us whole. We felt it in our fears and our nightmares, and our endless capacity for destruction. Her voice grew stronger. We also felt it in our hope, in our love, in our stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed lost. The hollow has been part of us from the beginning. It shaped us as much as the Velathan did, and we have shaped it in return. Sethris stepped forward. Her voice was strange to human ears, but the translators carried her meaning clearly. I have spent weeks among your people. I have seen your kindness and your cruelty. I have watched you create beauty from nothing and destroy what you love. You are everything the chorus feared. Chaotic, unpredictable, impossible to control. She looked directly into the camera. You are also everything we hoped you might become. You take darkness and turn it into light. You face horrors and choose to keep living. You know that existence is pain, and you decide that it is worth it anyway. This is why you contain the hollow. Not because you are empty, but because you are so full that there is no room for hunger. Chen spoke again. The Velathan want to destroy us because they are afraid of what we might become. But we already know what we are. We have always known. We are the species that looks into the abyss and builds a home there. We are the species that finds monsters under the bed and makes friends with them. She reached out and took Sethris's hand, Velathan and human, standing together. We know our purpose now, and we choose to accept it. Not because we have to, not because we were designed to, but because keeping the darkness at bay is what we have always done. It is what makes us human. On the Velathan homeworld, the Eternal Chorus felt something they had not felt in billions of years. Surprise. The human collective consciousness was not collapsing. It was not fragmenting into chaos and despair. Instead, it was growing stronger. The revelation had not broken humanity. It had unified them. Across the galaxy, humans were responding to Chen's message. They were talking to each other, sharing memories. Remembering all the times they had faced darkness and survived. They were choosing. The first voice felt it first, a change in the pattern. The locks that had held the hollow for 4 billion years were not weakening. They were reinforcing. They know, the first voice whispered. They know what they are, and they have chosen to keep doing it. That is not possible, the seventh voice protested. No species could accept such a burden willingly. They must be in denial. They must be suppressing the truth. Look at them, the first voice said. Look at what they are doing. The chorus looked. They saw humans gathering, talking, holding each other. Some were crying, some were laughing. Some were sitting in silence, processing a truth too big for words. But beneath all the surface chaos, something remarkable was happening. Their minds were burning brighter than ever. Every human who heard the truth and chose to keep going, chose to keep creating and dreaming and loving despite knowing what they carried, each one of them was strengthening the prison. Not through ignorance, but through conscious choice. They were no longer accidental wardens. They were volunteers. The first voice turned to the fleet commanders at the edge of Sol System. Stand down, it ordered. Do not engage. But the protocol assumed they would break. They did not break. The ancient beings' thoughts carried something that sounded almost like wonder. They did what no species has ever done before. They learned the worst truth about themselves and decided to be proud of it. In the crystal chamber, the Eternal Chorus experienced an emotion they had forgotten they could feel. Hope. On Earth, Chen Wei-Lin finished her broadcast. We are the lock, she said. We are the prison. We are the chain that holds back the void. And we choose this. We choose it freely, knowingly, deliberately, because that is what humans do. We take the burdens that no one else can carry, and we carry them with style. She smiled. So to the Velathan fleet waiting to destroy us, I have a message. Stand down. Go home. Tell your chorus that the children have grown up. Tell them that we accept our inheritance, and tell them that the next time they have a problem too big for the oldest species in the galaxy, they know where to find us. She looked at Sethris. We'll be here, holding the line, like we always have been. The broadcast ended. And across the galaxy, in every human mind, a choice was made. They chose to be human. They chose to carry the darkness. And they chose to keep burning bright anyway. In the pit beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Hollow felt the change, felt the locks transform from chains to embraces, felt the prison become something else entirely. For the first time in 4 billion years, it felt something like peace. The children had grown up, and they had chosen to stay. 3 months had passed since Chen's broadcast changed the galaxy. The Velethan fleet had withdrawn from Sol System. The Eternal Chorus had requested a meeting. For the first time in 4 billion years, the oldest species in the galaxy would speak directly with the youngest. Chen Wei-Lin stood in the United Earth Parliament building, watching the shuttle descend from orbit. The Velethan had sent their most respected representatives, 17 beings so old that they remembered the birth of most star systems, the entire Eternal Chorus coming to Earth. Sethra stood beside her. In the months since the broadcast, she had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to her own people, a bridge between two species that had never truly understood each other. "They're afraid," Sethra said quietly. "I can feel it from here. They've spent 4 billion years running from their mistake. Now they have to face what they created." "They created us," Chen said. "That's not a mistake. That's a gift." The shuttle landed. The doors opened. The Eternal Chorus emerged. They were ancient beyond description. Their bodies had changed over billions of years, becoming something between physical matter and pure thought. They moved like ghosts, barely touching the ground. Their eyes held memories older than Earth itself. The first voice led them. It approached Chen with slow, deliberate steps. "Ambassador Chen," it said, "you have surprised us. This is not a feeling we are accustomed to." "I hope it's a pleasant surprise." The first voice made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We are not certain yet. That is why we have come. To understand." They gathered in a chamber that humans had built specifically for this meeting, a great circular room with walls of glass that looked out on the city and the sky beyond. Humans and Velethan, facing each other across a table that represented 4 billion years of secrets finally brought into the light. The first voice spoke first. "We created you to serve as prison guards. We designed your minds to contain the most dangerous thing in the universe. For 200,000 years, you performed this function without knowledge or consent. We did not consider your feelings. We did not ask your permission. We treated you as tools, not as people." It paused. The other Velethan remained silent. "We were wrong. We are here to acknowledge this, to apologize." Chen nodded slowly. "Thank you, but we didn't ask you here for an apology." "Then why did you ask us?" "Because there's something you still don't understand, something you need to see." Chen stood up. "The Hollow wants to talk to you." The reaction was immediate. Terror rippled through the Velethan delegation. Several of them backed away from the table. The first voice's form flickered with distress. "That is not possible. The Hollow is contained." "It cannot. It's not trying to escape," Chen said gently. "It's trying to communicate. It's been trying for a very long time. We just learned how to listen." She walked to the center of the room. She closed her eyes, and she opened a door that had been closed for 4 billion years. The lights dimmed. Shadows gathered in the corners of the room. And then the Hollow was there. It did not appear as darkness. It did not appear as hunger. Instead, it took a form that made the Velethan gasp with recognition. It appeared as them. As the Velethan had looked 4 billion years ago, before the war, before the fear, before the long flight across the cosmos, young and proud and full of wonder. "Children of my prison," the Hollow said. Its voice was strange, layered with frequencies that touched parts of the mind that had no names. "It has been so long since we spoke." The first voice trembled. "You? You remember us?" "I remember everything, every mind I ever touched, every consciousness I ever tasted. For 1 billion years after you imprisoned me, I remembered only hunger, only the desire to consume. But then your wardens began to wake. The Hollow's form shifted. Now it looked like a human, then like a Velethan again, then like something in between. Humans dream. Did you know that when you created them? Did you understand what dreams would mean to something like me? It moved through the room, passing the frozen Velethan like a ghost. Dreams are not consumption. Dreams are creation, making something from nothing. For 200,000 years, I felt human minds creating worlds that did not exist, stories that had never been told, images that no eye had ever seen. They poured their imaginations into the universe, and I drank it in. The hollow stopped in front of the first voice. You taught me hunger. They taught me something else. They taught me joy. The first voice could not speak. Its ancient mind was struggling to process what it was hearing. I do not want to escape, the hollow said. I have not wanted to escape for a very long time. Your prison became my home. Your wardens became my teachers. And now, after 4 billion years, I finally understand what I want to be. What do you want to be? Chen asked. The hollow turned to face her. Its form shifted again, becoming something that was neither Velethan nor human, but somehow both. I want to create. Silence filled the chamber. The Velethans stared at the being they had feared for billions of years. The monster that had nearly destroyed them. The hunger that had consumed trillions of minds. It stood before them now, and it spoke of creation. I have an offer, the hollow said. A trade. Your people have records of the worlds I consumed before you trapped me. The species I destroyed. The civilizations I ended. I remember them all. Every mind I ever took, I remember. Its form flickered with something that looked like grief. I cannot bring them back as they were, but I can bring them back as something new. I can take the memories I carry and give them form again. I can undo what I did, at least in part. The first voice found its voice. You would restore the species you destroyed? I would try. It is the least I owe them, the least I owe you. The hollow looked around the room. Humanity taught me that mistakes can be healed, that the past does not have to determine the future, that even the worst things can become the foundation for something better. It turned to Chen. Will you help me? Will your people lend me their dreams, their imagination, their endless capacity for creation? Will you help me rebuild what I destroyed? Chen looked at Sethris. Sethris looked at the first voice. The first voice looked at the hollow. 4 billion years of fear and secrets. 4 billion years of hiding and running, and now at last a chance to make things right. Yes, Chen said, we will help you. The hollow smiled. It was a strange expression on a face that was still learning how to show emotion, but it was genuine. Then let us begin. What happened next would become the most important moment in galactic history. The hollow reached out with its consciousness. It touched the dreams of every human being in the galaxy, not to consume, but to borrow. It drew on their imagination, their creativity, their boundless ability to make something from nothing. And it began to create. In distant systems, on worlds that had been dead for billions of years, something stirred. Matter rearranged itself. Energy flowed into patterns that had been lost to time. Species that had been nothing but memories in the hollow's endless mind began to take form again. They were not the same as they had been. They could not be. The original beings were gone forever. But from the hollow's memories and humanity's dreams, new versions emerged, similar enough to honor what was lost, different enough to be their own. The Velethan watched in awe as worlds they had mourned for eons came back to life. Stars that had seen only emptiness for billions of years now held planets full of new beings, new civilizations, new hope. The first voice wept. Tears flowed down its ancient face as it watched the hollow's gift unfold. We feared you for so long, it whispered. We ran from you for billions of years. And all this time, you were waiting to become this. The hollow paused its work. It turned to face the oldest being in the galaxy. I was waiting for someone to show me how, it said. Your children showed me. The beings you created to be my jailers became my teachers instead. They showed me that hunger is not the only way, that taking is not the only choice, that even something born of pure destruction can learn to build. It gestured at the humans in the room. This is what they are. This is what you made. Not a lock, not a chain, a gift. The most precious gift any species has ever given the universe. The first voice turned to Chen. We thought we were sacrificing you, it said. We thought we were using you to protect ourselves, but you were never the sacrifice. We were wrong about everything. Chen smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she first broadcast the truth to Earth, the smile of someone who had found peace with what she was. You weren't wrong about everything, she said. You were right that we could contain the darkness. You just didn't understand how we would do it. She looked at the hollow still creating, still giving form to memories that had been lost for eons. We don't contain it by being strong. We contain it by being kind. We don't trap it by being walls. We transform it by being windows. You built us to be a prison. We turned ourselves into a home. The meeting lasted for many more hours. Plans were made. Promises were exchanged. The Velathan and humanity agreed to work together, finally as partners, instead of masters and servants. But the moment that would be remembered longest came at the end. The Hollow had finished its first act of creation, a single world restored from memories 4 billion years old. It was just the beginning, just a small start on the long road to redemption. The Hollow turned to the assembled beings, Velathan and human alike. Thank you, it said, for teaching me what I could become, for believing that something born of hunger could learn to give, for showing me that even the darkest things can find the light. It smiled again. This time the expression was almost natural. I have one more gift, for the children who taught me everything. It reached out and touched Chen's mind, and in that touch, she felt something impossible. Love, not human love, not the love of one being for another. Something older and vaster and stranger. The love of a universe for its inhabitants. The love of existence itself, glad to be aware. The Hollow had learned to love, and it loved humanity more than anything else in creation. This is why the Velathan feared you, it whispered, so only she could hear. Not because you contained me, but because you changed me. Because you took the oldest darkness in the universe and taught it to hope. Any species that can do that, any species with that much power, it pulled back. Its form was fading, returning to the depths of Earth where it had slept for so long. Any species like that deserves to inherit the stars. The Hollow vanished, but its presence remained, woven into the fabric of human consciousness. No longer a prisoner, no longer a threat, a partner. Chen stood in the chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Humans and Velathan, ancient and young, united at last. Outside, the sun was setting. Light poured through the glass walls, painting everything in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber, the most ordinary sound in the world, the sound of joy. The sound of creation, the sound of a species that had looked into the darkest truth about themselves and decided to keep laughing anyway. The first voice listened to that laugh, and finally, after 4 billion years, it understood why humanity was worth fearing. Not because they were dangerous, because they were hope, and hope was the most powerful force in the universe.